All of these things are what we're putting our body into. So we talk about what we put into our body ancestrally, but we also need to think about what we're putting our body into. Is our environment an ancestral environment? And we know that it's not. And so how do we recreate that? And that's kind of what this whole journey is about. And when we've implemented the solutions that we're going to talk about, we've seen some dramatic changes in people's ability to deal with all kinds of stress, emotional stress, physical stress, toxins. Your body's able to detox better when you have taken care of this issue, because the EMF actually damages the blood-brain barrier and your gut membrane, and it also has a huge effect on your eyes. And so all the barriers are compromised by EMF. And so
you're listening to Cleanse, Heal, Ignite podcast, and I'm your hostess, Diane Kaiser, functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, former pro soccer player, transformational leader, holistic healer, and life purpose coach, helping you and your business awaken to your full potential. We are a transformation tribe of visionaries empowering passion-quenching, heart-centered advice to wellness warrior leaders on self-love, nutrition, mindset, and divorcing perfectionism. Our mission is to help you laugh your way to a sexy belly, love your way to vitality, and live your life with purpose by sharing real talk and truth drops that will help you cleanse your body, heal your hormones, and ignite your life. Side effects of this podcast may include all-day energy, happy hormones, perfect poops, increased confidence, becoming your own best healer, and catching the self-love virus. There's currently no vaccination to protect you from this and no known cure. In most cases, listeners experience a strong desire to accept new challenges, ditch toxic people, follow their heart, and dance like no one's watching. If you experience moods happier than usual, live it unapologetically and share with your social media friends immediately.
All right, warriors, you have probably heard me talk about this before, the dangers of EMFs, dirty electricity, and the inception of 5G technology. This has never been tested on human safety, and so it is an absolute concern of mine right now. It is also one of the top 4 things that is considered a threat to the function of your pineal gland, which is really the seat of your intuition and your ability to think rationally, to think critically, and to think for yourself. So in this episode, I interviewed Brian Hoyer. It's amazing. It is a longer episode, but we have a lot to cover in it. So I would definitely take some notes. And I would also consider joining his course. He just started, he joined forces with one of my friends, Nick Pinot, who I just got certified through about 3 years ago to become one of the top and very first people to get certified as a health practitioner on the dangers of EMFs and EMRs in our home and to our bodies, our babies, and our beautiful temples. So this stuff is very important. You've also probably heard another episode where you learned that 80% of the people who are sensitive to EMFs and EMR are women. And of the entire population, 20% of humans are super sensitive in some way, shape, or form to smart technology, things like your cell phone and the damage they cause to your cells. So you're going to want to listen to this whole episode. And I'll also recommend that you consider joining the link in my blog. So once you are listening to this episode, you'll also be directed to my blog, which is Cleanse, Heal, Ignite. That'll take you to my podcast page, and you can look for this episode that I've done with Brian Hoyer. When you click on that, you will see the Electro Pollution Fix course, and you'll click on that link. You'll also get the discount through me. It is a 6-week EMF protection course designed to help you and your family in dramatically minimizing your exposure to harmful radiation or electricity without breaking the bank. So this is the simple version of the course that I took as a practitioner. And I think that every single human needs to understand how to protect themselves and the true damage that these wavelengths are causing you and your family, as well as your pets. So let's take a listen to this episode. May this episode help you to minimize your exposure to EMFs and really start to understand the damage that these things are causing us. Hey warriors, Diane Kaiser here. Welcome to another episode of the Cleanse, Heal, Ignite podcast. This is going to be a jam-packed episode, and you're probably going to want to listen to almost every word of it. Probably going to want to take some notes, and I want you to also just take a deep breath and open your lungs, open your mind, open your heart, and open up to the possibility that things can get better, but that also open your mind up to the possibility that there is the reality here that a lot of us just have not been taught some of these things that we're going to talk about today that may seem somewhat unbelievable And so I brought Brian Hoyer on today to talk about one of the most invisible threats to humanity and to our evolution. And it's something that is not talked about enough. And Brian is an absolute wellness whiz on this topic. I met him at the Bulletproof Conference about 4 years ago, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. And I was so impressed. He had this handheld device. I'm like, what are you gonna do? Beam me up to space with that? Is it like a time traveling machine? And he's like, kinda. So we went around looking at, assessing different things. So today I wanna keep it elusive because I'm not gonna tell you what we're talking about today. I'm just gonna go into a few of the things that Brian sees in terms of some of the symptoms that people are experiencing from this invisible toxin. But Brian, let's just get started here. You are someone who does home assessments and does health assessments for people to explore hidden roots and threats of toxicity, which we are similar in that thread. And I salute you for doing the work that you do. So we're not going to give it away what it is exactly, but let's just first start here because it's going to be obvious what you do throughout the show. What are some of the symptoms and sickness and suffering that you see, some of the clients that you work with directly, that they're experiencing from being directly or indirectly exposed to this invisible threat?
Yeah, so about probably 30% of the people that we go into their homes and we're testing different things, we see they're actually having real symptoms that they relate to these invisible stressors, and they feel a huge sensitivity, and so they have things like ringing in the ears, just general fatigue, and then a lot of the here, I'm just going to pull out this book. A lot of the unexplained illnesses, so that are in this book actually, by Dr. Martin Pall. And so, chronic fatigue, multiple chemicals, sensitivity, fibromyalgia, a lot of energy issues, even post-traumatic stress disorder, and Gulf War syndrome. And there's just a whole host of these inflammatory conditions that are related to these stressors. And then, so that's about 30% of the people that are experiencing those types of symptoms and those types of diagnosis. And then 70% of the people we see, they just want to optimize their health. And we see really amazing improvements with even things like people that have hypothyroidism. Mm-hmm. And, like we'll put in some solutions and those symptoms will improve. And so generally, anything that's stressing the body is going to be detrimental to your health if it's a toxic type of stressor.
Yeah. And I'm going to get that book because it's so true. The unexplained illness pandemic right now, you can say that's more of a pandemic than this virus itself. Don't quote me on this. I'm not saying this is science and there's no studies on this, but these are the findings, and you could get books like the one that Brian just mentioned to learn more about this. And then also I'll refer you to some links at the end of the show and in the show notes so that you could learn a lot more about this and how to safeguard yourself, which is also what we're going to talk about. So we've got hormonal problems, we've got immune system deficiencies, we've got major fatigue, sleep issues, infertility. I know I can go on and on about a lot of these things, autoimmune disease, cancer. People are wondering what's the root cause of this and is there a cure? So I say that with air quotes if you're watching the video. But today, Brian and I are going to talk about whatever I do in these episodes. There's builders to your health and then there's blockers to your health. So we tend to focus so much on building our health and eating healthier and exercising more and getting sleep and getting hydrated, which the majority of us are struggling with anyway. But I believe that the majority of people are struggling with the builders because they don't have enough energy or motivation or focus to even withstand that. Blood sugar dysregulation, they got poor energy, they need caffeine and sugar and stress to give them adrenaline throughout the day. So this is one of those blockers. This category is one of the most significant blockers that I've researched. I'm certified, but nowhere near as intelligent and wise as Brian is in this category. So I know just enough to be dangerous and just enough to bring Brian on the show. So Brian, let's get into some of the things here that, Dr. Klinghardt, you've been trained by Dr. Klinghardt, which if you guys are listening to this, Dietrich Klinghardt is one of our biggest mentors in the alternative industry, alternative wellness, holistic healing, functional medicine, getting to the root of why so many of us struggle and suffer. And he says that there's 4 things that calcify the pineal gland, which is your ability to think for yourself, intuition, and it also regulates the central nervous system. So if you have nervous system issues, nerve damage, fibromyalgia, like you just mentioned, there's 4 things that are the biggest threat to humanity right now. And we're going to talk about one of them today. There's fluoride, there's glyphosate, aluminum, and dirty Wi-Fi, electricity, radiation, and what you guys may now know as 5G that's coming soon. So we're going to talk about one of them today, because those are things that are in our food, or in our water, are in our personal care products, are in the air, and they're around us at all times. So Brian, that's so many things. Like if people are like, oh God, things are everywhere, I got to throw my hands up and just like give it all up, because what am I going to do? We're living in the most toxic world that we've ever lived in. So when you see people before they get to you, and I know you've worked with some really high performance athletes, and you work with Mercola, Dr. Mercola, you've worked with Ben Greenfield, and I think also Dave Asprey, is that right?
Not yet, but he's kind of on we're in talks with Dave Asprey and his team about, being on the show, and I'm speaking at the Upgrade Labs conference next time around that they have it.
Right. Yeah. He needs to have
So.
you. You're an essential human ingredient to our evolution right now. So, but my point is you've worked with a lot of high performance athletes, doctors, health professionals, and just, moms and people who just want their environment to be cleaner. So what are you seeing with a handful of these people, the average things that most people are doing in order to get rid of some of these symptoms and improve these symptoms that you just mentioned, these conditions, the suffering, which is PTSD. I consider that suffering, mental, emotional suffering, and thinking like, oh, I resolve something from my past, or is it something that's around me right now? I didn't even know that PTSD was one of them. So what are things that you see people doing? How much money have they spent on labs and diagnostic tools and all of these biohacks before they get to you and go, oh, this is the biggest blocker that was causing a lot of these issues?
Yeah. So, it's interesting because I do come at this from a holistic health perspective. I started off as a nutritional therapy practitioner. And so it's a functional, nutrition type of background. And that's what brought me to Dr. Klinghardt, and then realizing that these stressors are such a huge issue.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that I would see, even in my own clients that I was trying, my own struggle kind of speaks to what clients and what everyone out there is also struggling with, was that I was trying to build these specific nutritional protocols where my clients would be eating a, nutrient dense whole food diet, like very pristine. And then we would be healing their leaky gut and working on their hormone balancing and all of these different things. But every time I would get them off a supplement, because the goal is to eventually not have to supplement as much, a month off the supplement, their gut would become leaky again, and there would be problems. And so that's kind of the struggle that I was seeing in my own practice when I was doing nutritional therapy and when I lived in California. And, as soon as I started addressing things at home in their bedroom and perfecting that environment, which is your innate healing environment while you sleep, I didn't even have to use the leaky gut supplements anymore. They're like, things just started to kind of fix themselves. And I realized one of the things that Dr. Klinghardt speaks about in many of his lectures, pretty much every lecture he gives, is that if you don't fix your electromagnetic environment in your bedroom, you're not going to heal. Your protocols are not going to work. And in some cases, he says, I'm not even willing to work with anybody who doesn't take care of this.
Wow. And we just gave you guys the secret. We're talking about electronic, magnetic frequencies, radiation, Wi-Fi, and soon to be 5G. This is one of the 4 biggest core that I was referring to that Dr. Klinghardt was talking about. It's kind of like how I say, Brian, I don't know if you knew, my book launched last month, and so it's out.
Oh,
and
awesome.
So when I first started doing my work and learning how toxic breast implants were, I was just thought to myself, it's almost like saying to someone, if you're still smoking, I'll help you with your nutrition. So it's like, it's hard to work with someone when you know that the ticking time bomb is in or around them at all times, because they're going to spend a lot of money on supplements, like you said, and then it's going to look bad in the practitioner who's going to put a lot of heart into trying to help the patient, and they don't get better, because this is one of the core 4 that no matter what you do, no matter how much hyperbaric, no matter how much you're laying on a PEMF mat, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, these are all super advanced biohacks. You could have an infrared sauna, you could have all these things and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars like I did. But then when I became EMF practitioner certified, I was like, wow, this is a huge missing link. And with 5G, it's going to be everywhere. So we're going to talk about that. So
Yeah.
let's get into some of the statistics on just, EMF, EMR, because I do talk about this often, and I do have another show that you guys can listen to on this podcast where I interviewed Dr. Daniel Debron, who created, this what do you call it, Defender Shield, and also wrote a book on this same topic. So you guys can listen to that one too on some of the statistics. But Brian, is there anything recently, we're recording this now, July 2020. Is there anything that right now that you've seen studies, statistics on how dangerous and serious these radiation and frequencies are to our health?
Yeah, well, there's always new stuff coming out, and it's hard to stay on top of the most cutting edge research. But the real story to tell here is that there's a whole slew of research from going all the way back to the 1700s, 1800s. And there's this book called The Invisible Rainbow that kind of catalogs all of the, the advances in electricity and the symptoms that doctors and different practitioners were experiencing with people throughout all of history. And then at the introduction of electricity, the rise in symptoms that people would have. And so that's a really interesting book. If you really want to dive deep, that catalogs a whole history. And then there's also a lot of military studies that have been done since, I think the biggest one is like from the Navy in the 1960s. And they showed how there was a lot of biological effects. And that was the basis of what they developed a lot of the standards on in the beginning. And they kind of understood that there was a biologic effect. And there was a huge delay in actually pursuing the technology because of that. I mean, in the 1960s, we had the technology to start cell phone networks, but they didn't do it because of the studies that were there that showed the damaging health effects. And so it took until the 90s for the communications industry and then the development of the internet to be like, okay, well, this makes a whole lot more sense now to develop some kind of technology because we have a huge market for sending information back and forth. And then there's recent studies, even by the National Toxicology Program. They had a $25 million study that showed that cell phone radiation causes cancer in rats, in like heart schwannomas, brain tumors, tumors of the sex organs in male and female rats. And the telecom industry has about three times as much revenue as the big pharmaceutical companies do.
That's crazy.
And so, their pull in Washington, D.C. with all the lobbyists and everything, it's even more than big pharma, if you can imagine that. And so they have a huge interest in subverting a lot of the studies that show biological damage. And one of the things that's been kind of concerning is that people that understand physics, they understand that ionizing radiation is bad, like nuclear radiation, gamma radiation, and even UV radiation can damage your DNA. But the conventional understanding is that non-ionizing radiation doesn't cause damage. But that's actually been proven false within the last, we know that it has a biologic effect, but we also know that it does cause DNA damage through a different but similar mechanism. And that was actually proven by the doctor that wrote this book, Dr. Martin Pall from Washington State University. And he gathered a bunch of studies that show that the modulation of these frequencies, which basically means the way that they're pulsing, affects us on the cellular level. And it actually opens our voltage-gated calcium ion channels and causes calcium to flood into the cell and produces this really potent free radical called peroxynitrite. And then there's some other free radicals, some carbonyl free radicals and reactive oxygen and reactive nitrogen species. But basically that causes this inflammatory cycle to start, and it's called the no, oh no cycle. So it's like, no, oh no.
Oh no.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
But it's this inflammatory cycle that starts, and it doesn't stop as long as you're exposed to this type of radiation. And every single person, it'll show up in a different way, because you've got different links where you're weak. For one person, it might be thyroid. Another person, it might be adrenals. For another person, it might be their ear, nose, and throat inflammation or lung inflammation. Like if you're immunocompromised and you're exposed to something like COVID or pneumonia or some other bacterial lung infection, if that's your weak point, then this cycle, this inflammatory cycle that's happening and at a cellular level, it's going to affect your ability to deal with it in any area of your body where there's inflammation. So that's kind of why it's so important to take care of this as a foundation. And, we have this priority system that we'll go through a little bit later when we talk about the different types of EMF and everything. But it's something that, generally speaking, I kind of like to frame it in the way that we're always talking about, how do we eat more ancestrally? How do we live more ancestrally? And talking about what we're putting into our body. We need to eat nutrient-dense whole food like our ancestors ate. It's actually getting more popular to talk about the light and blocking blue light and the artificial light as being a big deal, which artificial light is a type of EMF. It's one of the 6 that we test for when we go into people's homes and we make recommendations to kind of shift things to a more natural light environment. But all of these things are what we're putting our body into. So we talk about what we put into our body ancestrally, but we also need to think about what we're putting our body into. Is our environment an ancestral environment? And we know that it's not. And so how do we recreate that? And that's kind of what this whole journey is about. And when we've implemented the solutions that we're going to talk about, we've seen some dramatic changes in people's ability to deal with all kinds of stress, emotional stress, physical stress, toxins. Your body's able to detox better when you have taken care of this issue, because the EMF actually damages the blood-brain barrier and your gut membrane, and it also has a huge effect on your eyes. And so all the barriers are compromised by EMF. And so in the beginning, we talked about the 4 stressors that Dr. Klinghardt talked about: fluoride, glyphosate, aluminum, and other aerosol metals, and then EMF. So EMF is kind of like the gateway for all of these other things to have a larger effect systemically throughout the body. So if you don't fix that, it's basically like trying to purify your water up front, and then all this other stuff. There's like all this other infiltration and contamination downstream. And so you have to fix the contamination first, and then your body can start to kind of filter out and detox from all these other stressors and toxins.
Yeah, and if you think about that, as your first line of defense, aluminum, it has an affinity for the brain. And so we have a lot of people with Parkinson's, neurological damage, Alzheimer's. Oh, I forgot. Brain fog.
Yeah.
Overwhelm, irritability. There's so many things. I can't even tell you, Brian, and this is same for you probably. When I hear people say, oh yeah, I've got Parkinson's, or I've got ALS, or I've got like cancer, and I'm going, well, what have you done to get to the root cause of that? And all they know is to go to the doctor, get more drugs, and do these really advanced brain scans, have chips installed inside of them to lower the amount of activity in the brain. And then fluoride calcifies the pineal gland and reduces our ability to even think for ourselves and have our sovereignty. And then when you have what was the other one? Glyphosate. Talk about gut. I mean, you're never gonna get away from a leaky gut as long as you have that one too. So right. Those 3, imagine they can go even deeper because of the EMF and the EMR and all of these frequencies. So it's a pretty big deal. And I want you guys to know about that. So I'm going to ask Brian about this next. Because this is interesting connection, right? A lot of you out there are listening and you've had mold exposure, maybe Lyme. If you're a breast implant illness woman, you've had probably false positive or maybe false negative. I don't even know. Lyme disease is something that women in the breast implant illness community are often tested positive for. And they do, again, lots of diagnostics, and then they go through a Lyme protocol and they still have their breast implants and they still haven't addressed dirty electricity. And so I'm like, before you go do all of those things, let's get to the biggest ones that are harming your body. And so there's this connection. And like, I'd love for you to talk about it, Brian, and we can start getting into some of the solutions. So amplification of mold and heavy metals inside of our body in the presence of dirty electricity, Wi-Fi frequencies, and microwave frequencies running through our body. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of studies that show that mold, pathogenic mold, and fungus will actually proliferate more when exposed to different types of EMF radiation. And that, you know, you just think about the way that works is a lot of the electromagnetic radiation that we have is this pulsating radiation, and it's a stressful pulse. So, you know, our bodies perceive it as a stressor, but also other life forms, fungus, plants, bacteria, viruses, whatever, they're also perceiving that as a stressor as well. And so when they perceive that stressor, it's a threat, and they start to proliferate and multiply as a survival mechanism. And so when you're sleeping and you're continually bombarded by these frequencies, yes, it's attacking your own cells, but it's also attacking the microbiome within you and giving it information like, hey, there's something that's trying to attack us. And so they proliferate more, and it causes imbalances. And then that's how your immune system actually overreacts and starts to try to take care of the rise in the multiplication of these different, bacteria, fungus, yeasts, whatever it might be inside of us. Even parasites too are another one. So and then as far as the heavy metals, every single metal ion and particle, they resonate with these frequencies inside your body. And depending on the size, that's what, the metal will resonate at a certain frequency, and then it will retransmit even inside of your body. And this is something that we can test in the real world when we're using like a shielded room, and we're testing with all the equipment that we have, that there's the different size metal objects will resonate and rebroadcast out a frequency inside, of another enclosure or outside. And so there's, the body's made up of all of these conductive materials, made up of minerals. Every mineral either aligns with the magnetic field or disaligns with it. And the pulsating magnetic fields that we're exposed to are not natural. And so it's actually disrupting the normal metabolism, the normal way that human bodies have worked for millennia, thousands of years. And so it makes sense that what we would want to do is recreate an environment where our body is doing what it was supposed to be doing. So there's no distractions and everything. And so all, the metals and these other toxins that are out there, they are definitely having effect and interacting with the EMFs in different ways. And it's the physical toxins that we have to worry about, but it's also these, what I call biophysical stressors. So they're energetic, artificial energies that are coming in and causing disruptions in the normal way that our bodies biologically and physiologically process toxins and nutrients and everything. So it's a disruption really to healing, because the body is always trying to heal. Your body's on your side. And when you have a symptom, it's your body telling you that, hey, I'm trying to excrete something. You get a rash, you're like, oh my gosh, I just took this supplement and it gave me a rash. Well, that's because it's supporting your body in detoxing that and taking it out of your body. And, so like we got to think of symptoms more as the body's like waving a sign on the side of the road, like, hey, I need help. And thanks for doing this, but I need some more support on shuttling this out in the proper way. And often people that we come across, and we're going into their homes and testing these sorts of things, they're encouraged to go through detoxification. And as you know, there's so many shoddy cleanses and detoxes that are out there that are really careless, and they don't support the body along the way to shuttle the toxins out appropriately. And that's why people get symptoms. And if we were really making a individualized protocol, somebody could theoretically go through an entire detox and not have any rashes or fatigue or symptoms if we were able to bind all the toxins and get them out of the body properly. But it's nearly impossible to do that because we can't continually monitor each person. So we build protocols to support the gallbladder, the liver, the adrenals, the gut, make sure things don't get reabsorbed into the bloodstream. And EMF is part of that, because in order to have integrity in our barriers during a detox, you have to have you can't have the stressors that are ripping those barriers apart.
Right.
And so there's a huge interaction. There's never just one cause of any symptom or illness. It's multiple things kind of working together with this perfect storm.
Yeah, this is holistic health, you guys. And so reductionistic healing or working with a doctor who specializes in something, it's just not going to cut it anymore. I believe that the practitioners of today that are going to help you get through whatever issues that you have are looking at all of the pillars and how they all play together or not. You know, I think of the analogy, it's like if you don't open up the pathways, like Brian said, and you're doing detox or you're cleaning up EMF toxicity around the house, but you don't have a place for these toxins to leave, you know, bile gets recirculated. Like 95% of bile that's released from your gallbladder, stored in your gallbladder, released from your liver, carries all these fat soluble toxic waste products, and it's trying to get out through your stool. But if you're constipated, if you're not pooping twice a day, at least once a day, then all of those toxins are going right back up where they were before. And it's also drawing in the EMF frequencies. And it's just this perfect literal shitstorm. And what you said earlier, it's like my analogy for describing this is kind of like, you know, you take your trash from the bathroom and you dump it into your big waste bin that you pull onto the street that gets carried out once a week. You could do all this work to clean up all the trash in your house and put it in that waste bin. But if the guys don't come once a week or you forget to carry it over to the street, this is the equivalent of not releasing enough out of sweat, out of breath. Like 70% of our detox is out of our breath. And then we have all these masks and we're covering it up and sucking our air back in, and stool, like everything. Your detox needs to be on point for all of these things to work. So that's such an important key right there, Brian. And I also say symptoms are self-love from the soul. It's really your body trying to get your attention. So would you put a mask over your 5-year-old child who is screaming and tell it to shut up when it's really telling you it's upset? You would sit with that child and you would say, hey, honey, what's wrong? Is your stomach hurting? Do you need something? Are you tired? So you help that child to figure out what the problem is. So there's nothing different. It's like your symptoms are like your inner child screaming for your support. And so speaking of children, that's another, let's get into some of the solutions, Brian. I love your approach. This is important. You guys see, he's not just talking about EMS. We're talking about how everything affects everything. I wanted to say this too before I forget. I remember one day I reached out to you in January and I was like, Brian, I'm researching these components, and it was for my book because I had breast implants last year and I felt more EMF zaps through my body, and they were only across my breasts, which is when I had breast implants, than I've ever felt. And I was concerned. I'm like, are these mini strokes? Like, what is this feeling that I have? And so I did everything I could. I got external keyboard, external mouse. I did everything that I could. I started getting grounding devices. I bought my little machine to detect Wi-Fi frequencies that were high in the house, started playing with breakers. You did everything that we're going to talk about in solutions. And then when I got my breast implants out, they reduced significantly. But you did say in one of the texts that you sent me is that you found an article, and I'll put the article in the show notes, that states that various conductive materials are used in breast implants. And if that's the case, it could have an effect on the nerves. I had nerve impingement on my arm and was possibly restricting lymphatic flow and detox of these materials from the breast implants that my body had been circulating around, because they all generally leak or bleed. They all bleed. So if you have breast implants, you might be more susceptible to, EMF toxicity. So let's get into some of the solutions. We don't have to talk about specifically breast implants, but I just wanted to, put that little bookmark in there for some of the ladies. In my book, I talk about just enough to get you interested in EMF, EMR, and then follow Brian for some of his resources. So there's kids, there's breast implants, there's some people who are more susceptible to this, but it seems as though everybody's going to be somewhat negatively impaired by these invisible toxins. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a foundational, we have foundations of nutrition. You need to have your macronutrients in balance, and each person's very individual with that. And so, but generally speaking, we want people to eat nutrient dense whole food that's from nature, from sources of natures like our ancestors ate. And so that's a foundational food input. And then there's also the foundational environmental input with toxins, like all these modern toxins from industry. We don't want those to be in our lives, really. And our body needs to have those cleared out if we have exposure to them, which we do. And then also with the EMF environment, it's the same way. Like, how do we recreate that environment in the bedroom? And so, in your house and in general, like, basically we can't avoid exposure 100% anymore because it's everywhere. We have FM radio stations, we have television stations blasting, we have satellites, cell phone towers. We all have cell phones, and a lot of us have Wi-Fi. Now there's ways that we can replace a lot of what we're currently using for better solutions. But then there's also this idea that with a priority system, any healing modality requires the body to activate healing. And in order to activate healing, your nourishment has to outweigh your stressors. So if you can kind of imagine a scale, and this goes along with the paradigm that you're just talking about here earlier, is that if your nourishment's on this side and your stressors are on this side, we have to relieve the stressors, get rid of the toxins, get rid of the EMF and everything stressing the body in order for healing to be activated. And there has to be enough nourishing support and resources for the body to do its healing work. Now, here's the thing: is when does the body do its healing work? It happens mostly at night. That's when your brain detoxes. It's when your lymphatics are draining, your tissues are being restored. You're using the nutrients from the day to repair, and your body is supposed to be in this what's called a parasympathetic state. So you have your fight or flight state, which is your sympathetic state, and then your rest and digest state, which is your parasympathetic. And so there's really 3 times when your body is supposed to be in a parasympathetic healing state. It's when you're sleeping, that's number 1, when you're eating, so you can digest your food, and then when you're detoxing. And so sleep is actually a huge detoxification process. And so that's where we focus in on really dialing in the bedroom for the stressors. And then when you eat, a lot of times we'll recommend our customers, like, okay, eat your food at your dinner table, but then go into your completely mitigated and shielded room for half an hour or an hour while you're digesting your food after you eat, so that you can actually get the hydrochloric acid, the bile, the enzymes, and everything that's supposed to help you break down and digest that food and use those nutrients. You can actually absorb that so that you can use it for repair later at night. And then, when you're detoxing, that's like at night when you sleep, yeah, but also like in a sauna. You want to be in a 0 EMF sauna, ideally, so you're not bombarded with these stressors. You can actually relax and sweat out the toxins, because a passive sweat that's not active, like exercise, it's very different. A passive sweat will actually get the toxins out of the body more easily. And so with these solutions, there's 6 stressors that we test for when we go to people's houses. And there's the electric fields, which is from the wiring in your walls. And that's probably the one that a lot of people aren't thinking about very much. We're thinking about our wireless radiation, but there's also wired radiation. That's voltages that are in the walls. And so, first time in human history that when we invented electricity, we never had these pulsating frequencies before. But if you think about the way that electricity actually impacts the body, like if anybody's ever had those little patches where you have voltage patches that contract your muscles, it'll be an involuntary contraction. Or like when you restart a heart, your heart's a muscle, you pump voltage into it to restart, it contracts the heart muscle. And then calcium contracts the muscle, magnesium relaxes. So these pulsations of voltage, they actually impact us on the cellular level. And what we've done in our modern building is we've surrounded ourselves with wires all around us, around the ceiling, sometimes even through the floors, and it's emanating onto our bodies and causing these micro pulsations all night long while you're sleeping. You're using up calcium and magnesium. And I think this is a huge reason why so many people are magnesium deficient. And so some of the solutions that are out there, they say get a sleep switch to shut off the power to your room to prevent these contractions from happening. But we do more than that. We're also testing for wiring errors, which are related to another stressor, magnetic fields. So there's electric fields, magnetic fields. There's dirty electricity, which is thousands of different frequencies that are riding on the wires of the house and all the conductors of the house as if it's an antenna. And then there's also the wireless frequencies themselves that are bombarding and penetrating into your house. And then artificial light, and then the geopathic stress from the earth. That's the list of everything. So when we do an assessment, we'll assess all of these things, build a specific protocol for a person's house, and kind of help you prioritize it in order of what comes up as the biggest stressor. But we're also wanting to prioritize the bedroom because that's where we get the most bang for our buck. That's where we see people improve the most after they've completely shielded that. And the way that we shield it is there's a special paint that you can use that blocks out the wireless frequencies. And then that's grounded so that the earth energy is kind of coming onto the conductive layer, and the electricity cannot penetrate into that space anymore. So, the goal is to get the readings inside of a shielded bedroom and for it to be nearly the same as it would be if, like, before we had electricity. And when that happens, all these dormant healing responses all of a sudden wake up, and our bodies are like, oh my gosh, I finally can do what I wanted to do at night for 2, 3, 4, 5 decades or more. And all of us have been born into an electrified world where our bodies have never even had the opportunity to do the massive amount of healing that we're capable of. We have so much potential in the human body for healing, and we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot by allowing ourselves to be bombarded by all of this technology and these frequencies that have never ever been in our environment before 120 years ago. And so this is like so important. It's foundational for any holistic healing to happen. And it's going to help improve all of the outcomes. And that's what we've seen is when people have this as the ultimate solution, especially just the bedroom. And then, there's different adjustments we can make, and we'll talk about the things you can do right now. But the ultimate is to protect the bedroom with the shielding paint and the floor. There's a flooring material we put underneath. So it's kind of like a home remodel for your health. That's one option. And the other option is we have this, the first organic cotton shielding fabric that's ever been produced. We have it now, and we're starting to produce these sleeping canopies that people can put around their bed. And so that's something that we'll have in a couple months here. And it's July right now, 2020. So we should have it by the end of September, early October. We'll have enough product that I can actually publicly offer it. Right now, we're only offering it to people we've done EMF assessments for. Mm-hmm. But those are kind of the ultimate panacea solutions for boosting your healing. And then there's other little things that, like, throughout the house that we can talk about. And so you mentioned earlier before we started that you wanted to go through a list. Maybe we could just go through that list now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And already what you're speaking of is so important. I mean, of course, it's always important. Okay, well, where do I start? Bedroom. Okay, there's a lot of things right there. And so some of these might also be bedroom for your children, or just things that you're doing throughout the day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire some things to Brian, because there's a lot of things that people are doing unknowingly that are hurting them and their children, like iPads and phones and AirPods and things. So let's just start going through some of these. One of them actually is driving a car. I have an Audi 2014 S5, and I noticed that with my right foot in the pedal, I was getting electrostatic shocks through my right leg where I was having to pull my foot off the pedal. And so there's that, and there's all of the technology with all the bells and whistles of my center console and GPS and things. So my right side is obviously closer to all of that, but I also noticed that it was hitting the pedal. So would you say that people who are driving, especially newer cars, are exposed to a lot of higher radiation? And if so, what can they do about that?
Yeah, so almost all the new cars now have the ability to connect your phone to the Bluetooth in there, so you can like play your music and get on a phone call while you're driving, hands free and everything. So the first thing I would say is just if you're driving, you know, just you can turn off, there's settings where you can turn off the Bluetooth. You don't have to connect. But a lot of us rely on GPS, and that's just the way it is because we don't look at maps anymore. We can't memorize maps for some reason anymore. I think that's part of the calcification of the pineal gland.
Yeah.
But you know, I had a friend in junior high who was like so good at it, and I look back and think about him now and think, oh my gosh, like his value to society is just so like downgraded today because of GPS. I feel so bad for people like that are so good at telling you directions, and I think it's actually more common in LA for people to be like that.
Yeah.
Like, get on, you know, there's a SNL skit on, get on the 5, go up to, you know, San Bernardino, whatever.
Yeah, I remember that.
Where you belong. Like, but anyway, sidetrack. But yeah, so where were we? What was I talking about before that?
We were talking about like in my car, how a lot of our cars that we have are, you know, I have my Spotify on, I have some sort of a map always on.
Right.
And my right foot's getting zapped. So I can feel it specifically in my right foot. And I've talked to other people, and this sort of thing is happening too. So it's a whole bunch of stuff going on in the car.
Okay. Yeah. So with the zapping, what you can do is you can talk to your mechanic and tell them that you want a little piece of metal wire to just hang down from somewhere on the frame on your car, and it can be in the undercarriage, so it's not visible anywhere, but so that it'll just kind of drag closer to the ground. And that will, you know, you don't want it to, it's going to be a wire that just kind of hangs and is closer to the ground, but it's going to provide a lower voltage potential to prevent a lot of the shocks that you can get from the alternator and the AC current that's actually running through the car. And then the separate issue with the GPS is you can actually go to your maps, you can plug in your address and route it to your location, and then you can actually turn your phone on airplane mode and it still works. So as long as it has your phone has the ability to download the map and you know, even if it's on airplane mode, it doesn't need to be connected. Even if you make a wrong turn, it will guide you back. And you can look on the screen and you can kind of see where the blue line is, where you're supposed to go. So that will drastically reduce your exposure in the car while you're driving. But yeah, all cars basically produce a lot of magnetic fields from the wheels spinning, because they have magnets in them. And when the magnets spin, it's creating this pulsation of this magnetic field that's kind of going at a certain number of rotations per minute. And so that's something that's nearly unavoidable. And what I would actually more recommend for when you're traveling, if you do a lot of commuting and things like that, is to provide yourself some nutritional support before you get in the car that will deal with a lot of the inflammation that you're going to be getting from the inevitable exposure. So some of those strategies would be things like hydrogen water, the H2 tablets, and then also I really like the proteolytic enzymes, like taking a bunch of those before you hop in the car, and just, you know, it'll help with inflammation as well. And then there's a product by Biotics Research that has a bunch of really good stuff in it called Cap Arrest, and it's got propolis and frankincense and rosemary extract, and some of these things that Dr. Klinghardt cites as being helpful with EMR exposure. But it has it's mainly to downgrade the NF-kappa B inflammatory pathway. So that's a really good product as well. And then, individually, it's always going to be different. So I really like it if people are able to get either energetically tested, or they can work with their health practitioner on what the best natural anti-inflammatory product would be for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then also driving on an empty stomach is really good, because you don't, anytime that you eat a lot and then you drive, you're not going to digest your food as well because of the EMF exposure.
Right, the stress.
And so, if you have leaky gut while you're digesting food, you're going to have all this undigested food particles going into your small intestine, into your bloodstream, and that causes more inflammation.
I hear so many things here, Brian. It's like, well, first, okay, I'm just going to sell my car and buy a horse. That could use my maps. I've been saying that for a long time anyway, because I was like, oh my God, we're spitting out all this aluminum and junk and particulates in the air. And that's a big part of why we're so sick today. And actually, that's what Zach Bush is saying, is why this virus thing, speaking in code here, is so dangerous, is because viruses like to hijack and hop on the ride of the molecule of heavy metals, like cyanide, being one of them, comes from exhaust, comes from manufacturing plants, plastic things that we're making fake things of that are petroleum based, and it's all in the air, and that's possibly why it's such high numbers in big cities. Who knows?
Yeah.
Could be that. Also, a lot more electronic magnetic frequencies in these big cities. So it's
Yep.
It's like, really, is it the one thing, or is it the combination of the things? So ultimately, by and large, is to take as best care of your body as possible. Do you have anything to comment on about that, Brian?
Oh yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That it's this perfect storm of all of these things happening. And New York City, is one of the top areas where we've tested, the highest amounts of EMF, because of the density of the population. The bandwidth that's needed to support that dense of a population is so much more than any other place in the United States. So it actually was not very surprising to me that they had the most deaths, besides their huge mistake of sending the immunocompromised elderly individuals back into the nursing homes and infecting those that were most vulnerable. That was horrible that happened.
Yes.
But the bombardment of all these frequencies has a huge impact on the immune system. And I looked when this virus started happening, and people were talking about the possible link to 5G and all of these things. I didn't really buy into that right away, but as I looked, it was like all of the areas where they did have a lot of electromagnetic frequencies. It wasn't just 5G, but the areas where they did start 5G testing, like in Milan, Italy, and New York City and Seattle, and some of the hot spots in the beginning, all of these areas, Wuhan was a big 5G place as well. But it's not so much about that buzzword 5G, it's about the saturation of the frequencies. And these lower frequencies that aren't necessarily considered 5G, in quotation marks,
right,
they are actually resonate more with the human body. So and the people that are upgrading all the networks, they kind of understand that the higher frequency wavelengths actually don't penetrate as well into homes. So if we're going to use 5G networks in our homes, which is what they want people to do, they can't use those really high frequencies. Those have to be reserved for densely populated areas and point-to-point communications on towers. So you have a hill here with a transmitter that's blasting in this direction like this, and then you have a hill on the other side of town like this, and it has another transmitter, and it's blasting information, and it's sending information from tower to tower and then down to other towers in the valley so that they can transfer all the data. And so you need the higher frequencies to be able to send all that bandwidth around in order to communicate with the smaller towers that operate on lower frequencies, like sub 6 gigahertz, and those will actually penetrate into our houses more. And there's a book by Dr. Robert Becker, And he talks about how the frequencies that actually impact or resonate the most with the human body are around 50 megahertz to 110 megahertz. And that's right within the FM radio range. And what I've found on my equipment is that, yeah, that is the one that's the most, but it also goes all the way up to about 4 gigahertz is really reactive with the conductance of the human body. So to me, those are actually much more concerning from the testing that I've done than these higher millimeter waves frequencies. And we're probably jumping the gun here a little bit on talking about 5G, but it seemed appropriate to kind of start talking about that at this point. And then, you know, we can maybe end with some of those solutions. I don't know.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, 5G is, I'm not scared of many things. The only real big fear, the unknown I have, is what 5G could look like to our health, because it has not had proper studies done by those that are rolling it out that stand to profit from it. And that's everywhere, you guys. They continually, there's been court cases and interviews. You were in a documentary, weren't you? What was the name of the documentary? That's what prompted this interview. I remember going like, oh, I got to get Brian on my show.
Yeah, you know, I don't even know. I was
Oh, you don't know you were on one?
No, I was in I did an interview, and they used the interview, I think probably the interview I had with Dr. Mercola, because I had a coronavirus interview with Dr. Mercola, and I think they might have included that. I haven't even seen the documentary that everyone keeps saying, "Hell, you're so great in the documentary." Like, I didn't even know I was in that, but
Brian's not so humble. It's a great documentary. I'll send it to you so you could watch how you were featured in it. But it was really talking about the unknown with this, and we have no idea what it's going to cause to us with this, you know, all of these different things crossing each other and what it's going to do to our body. I already am super EMF sensitive. If I touch my trackpad, if I touch my laptop, if I touch my phone for too long, I start sneezing. I can feel the pain going through my body. You know, 20% of us are EMF sensitive, according to the work of, you know, that Dr. Daniel was talking about. But I think at this point, all of us have some sort of effect. We might not feel it, right? Like that you might not have some sort of symptoms, but it's having other related symptoms, but you wouldn't put 2 and 2 together that, oh, I have erectile dysfunction because of this, or infertility because this, and all the other things we started this show on. So just know this is one of those silent killers, and it's just slowly or quickly causing a lot of issues. And we'll end with some case studies and some happy testimonials and clients that we've worked with and patients that have actually had a lot of resolve from cleaning this up in their homes. But I'm going to start firing them off at you, because these are the ones that a lot of people are doing that I think that could cause some severe damage. Like you said, start with your bedroom. That's a big source of them. So I'm going to throw some at you. We could just kind of bullet fire this and just get through them really quickly. So some of the blockers are home lights. There's incandescent, there's halogen, there's all, you know, the super efficient ones. Which are the ones that are best for our health and also optimizing light in the home?
So the incandescent sources, the regular incandescent bulb and the halogen bulbs, those are the best ones. And the higher the wattage, the better, actually, because they burn hotter and they flicker less. And so, you know, a lot of LED bulbs and most LED bulbs and all fluorescents flicker like crazy. And fluorescents are the absolute worst. Those should be taken out of your home very carefully immediately. They have mercury vapor in them, and they also cause dirty electricity to come onto your whole electrical line and your whole house electrical system, and they flicker, and the spectrum is terrible. And so there's nothing healthy about those besides because of the mercury vapor that's in them, they can actually emit a little bit of UVB radiation, which is why they use those in lizard lamps to help the lizards produce vitamin D. But if you need that, just go outside at, you know, a certain time of the year at noon, and you can get that from the sun. So, and the sun is really what we're trying to mimic. So the sun is an incandescent ball of gas. And I think there's a childhood song about that. The sun is a massive incandescent gas, and talks about it like that. But the sun is incandescent. It's heat that is producing the light. And the same thing with these bulbs. The higher wattage bulbs are actually better. And then there are some LED bulbs, if you have to use those, that are constant current, zero flicker, and they have a high, what's called a high CRI. So you want CRI levels that are 90 or above are what are recommended. And that basically means color rendering index, and it has a more full spectrum of light. Still not like what an incandescent light bulb would be, because incandescent CRI is 100, but there's some LEDs that are healthier than others. And so
Okay.
it's the flicker and the spectrum that we're concerned about.
Awesome. Thank you for that. My dad will be interested in this as a former electrician. Okay, let's talk about some of these ones too. I was yelling at my boyfriend last night because he was wearing his Fitbit to bed, and I was like, get that thing off your wrist now and forever. So actually, I just want to hear you talk about it so I don't just sound like the crazy girlfriend.
Yeah, so Fitbits, they're constantly producing wireless radiation, and the Apple Watches kind of do the same thing. If it's on airplane mode, it's okay. But usually with the Fitbit and the Apple Watch, if it's on airplane mode completely, then it doesn't work. And so what I would recommend if you do want a fitness tracker is to get an Oura Ring, because that has an airplane mode and it can track your heart rate variability, your deep sleep, your REM sleep. And that is a much healthier fitness technology to wear. And we've actually had customers use those before and after shielding, and they've improved their deep sleep by as much as 500%. So it's pretty amazing what happens when you actually create an environment where you're free of the stressors and you actually allow your body to get into deep sleep. And that's one of the things that's interesting, is that a lot of people think they sleep well because they don't wake up or they don't remember waking up. But if you get a tracker like that, like an Oura Ring, you realize how little deep sleep you're actually getting, and that you are actually waking up quite a bit during the night, and you don't realize it. So that's something that we actually do recommend for people to get for before and after, just so they have some empirical data, because people need that. A lot of people do anyway.
Yes, because sleep is definitely one of the most underutilized medicines out there, and people are just not getting enough of it. And like you said, a lot of people assume just because I didn't wake up through the middle of the night means I got a solid X number of hours. And you also should not be getting up to pee in the middle of the night, you guys. It should be a solid 7 to 9 hours of rested sleep. And if you're waking up feeling like you are not recovered, there's something going on. And I would highly suspect this is a big part of it.
Yeah, so EMF, yeah, so the EMF is a big part of waking up in the night, but also, obviously your diet and your blood sugar regulation and that sort of thing.
And parasites.
And then, yeah, parasites, that too.
Activated by EMFs.
Yeah, and that's why when the moon is full moon, that's why the parasites are actually proliferating during that time, because the magnetic field is so high. And that's why, like with the tide, there were some studies that showed these mussels that were harvested from the East Coast of the United States and brought to Illinois, and they opened at the same time that the tide would have been if it was in Illinois. They didn't open at the same time as it was in Maine or wherever they harvested them from. And so the only explanation the scientists could come up with is that these clams or oysters or whatever they were detecting the magnetic field from the moon and how it's affecting the tide. And so that's our bodies are tuned into the natural frequencies of the earth and the rhythms of the earth. And, women have a menstrual cycle, men have a cycle too, but it's not so well known. There's not as much known about that because we don't have a lot of symptoms that are associated with it that are obvious. So, but yeah, I want to say one more thing about the Oura Ring, is because someone's going to ask, well, how does it track if it's not producing a signal or something? Well, it has a battery, and it uses an infrared sensor, just like a pulse oximeter that you can use to test your heart rate and everything. So it's an infrared sensor on it that's tracking everything and downloading the information. And then you do connect it with Bluetooth to a phone so you can look at all the data. But it's just a temporary thing that you can put it back on airplane mode.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for clarifying that. I should get them on my show too, because I've been wanting to get an Oura Ring and test this thing out. Okay, maybe about 10 more minutes just firing some of these off. Earbuds, earpods, holding the phone up to the ear, speakerphone, those that's plugged in to the computer. What's the story in all these different ways that we hear our technology?
Yeah, so the earbuds are absolutely terrible. It's basically like having two cell phones on either side of your head. and it's intense.
The
And
AirPods, you mean, or
yeah, the ear pods. Yeah.
you mean those small white ones? Just
Yeah, yeah. The
yeah,
ones
yeah,
that are used for Apple, the
right,
AirPods.
right, with no
And
wires.
yeah, and then also the earbuds. And so, anything that's using Bluetooth to communicate with your phone is blasting radiation right at the source.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like basically having your phone up to your head. And then, the further away you have your phone from you, the better. I usually have my phone on speakerphone if I have to use it, and I have a shielded Faraday pouch that I use to kind of talk on it. And any the cases are, you have to get a meter to measure the cases on how effective they are, but you really want one. The bags I've found are the best ones that will actually block the most and still allow a signal to come through. But you don't want to put it all the way in the bag, and that's the thing. There's not really any that are designed in the proper way. I used to sell some, but I haven't gotten around to producing that because we've been so busy with everything else.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Question about, I myself have, when you're exercising at the gym, and I have the Bose, not these ones, but the Bose earbuds, and they are connected to my Bluetooth. So like when I'm jump roping and doing crazy things at the gym or sprints on the treadmill, can't go to the gym now, but you know what I mean? Outside, even running with my phone in my hand, like people are doing this all the time, including myself. And I've often wondered, because when I had Apple AirPods, I could feel it through my teeth. I had tinnitus, ear ringing later on. I just felt it in my brain. I would have a headache for 2 days, even just putting them in my ear for 10 minutes. So using those, and I thought, well, I don't feel so bad wearing the Bose earbuds because for whatever reason. So is it that even though I don't feel it as much as the other ones, they could still be causing a lot of damage just because they're Bluetooth?
Yeah, well, some of the different technologies are using a different modulation that one person may be more sensitive to than another person.
Right.
And also the intensity might be different too. Apple may have a higher an antenna that's pumping out more radiation than another because they want to make sure the signal is strong. So it's something where you really have to have a professional either test it to see how bad it is. But honestly, like if I was to prioritize this for somebody, if you're exercising, you're in a more sympathetic state, it's not as important as if you're just trying to relax with your earbuds in or your AirPods in. You're not going to be able to relax as much. You're in a more vulnerable state.
Right.
And so there's going to be more damage that's done during that time. But for people that are sensitive like yourself, it's important to kind of dial that in and, especially your bedroom, but also the daytime exposures that are leaving you with these symptoms become more important for people that are sensitive, because you've already got damage that's been done in that cycle that's being perpetuated of the inflammation. So
right,
that's where it becomes
implants, you mean?
Yeah, from that and other, other things. Like if you have some ear ringing, then there's some kind of inflammation in the ear, nose, and throat and inside the ear that needs to be repaired. And so if you're perpetuating that with earbuds or AirPods or whatever, then that's gonna, that needs to be healed first before you can even think about putting something back in, because right now your body can't handle the stress if it's
right.
leaving you with all those symptoms afterwards.
Right, especially for those who have lymphatic congestion, which at this point is pretty much all of us, but those of you who have, a lot of swelling in areas, especially on your ankles, women with breast implants, this is so common. There's a lot of people who aren't detoxing properly from the lymphatic, and that's 75% of your body fluids, because most of us are not moving and we're stagnant. So that's a big part of it too. So for people who are carrying around these, now I'm just going to lump it all into one so we can, in essence of time. We have kids holding onto iPads and playing games all times, small children holding onto the iPads or playing with phones. We have teenagers moving into adults that are playing all the time, video games on computers, typing on computers all day. We've got these three: cell phone, iPad, computers, whatever, or just smartphones. So we have these, and mine's grounded, but I still wonder, of all these things, how do we protect ourselves the most so that the kids can use them? Is it about minimizing time? Is it about buying devices? Is about what's the best solution here, Brian?
Yeah, well, I'm a big proponent of excuse me. I'm a big proponent of minimizing the time, even just the natural screen time that kids are having because of the blue light and also the EMF exposure. But ultimately, we want to kind of try to move back to wired connections for people. And there's different levels that you can go to. The first step that many people can take is turning off your Wi-Fi at night when you're not using it. A lot of people are blasting that like all day long and all night long, and you don't ever get a break from it. So that's a very first step. And usually, you can actually get a Christmas light timer and plug your Wi-Fi router into that, and it'll automatically turn off at, say, 11 p.m. or midnight. If it turns off sometime when the last person like should be using the internet, and then comes on at like 7 a.m. or something. Or you can, if it's just you can turn it off earlier, when you're sleeping. But usually you can compromise in the household and get it to turn off at a certain time and then turn on at a certain time if that's an issue. Otherwise, just wire everything. They actually have adapters for your phones now, the Ethernet adapter, Ethernet to USB-C or Ethernet to Lightning, Ethernet to mini USB, whatever your phone is or your iPad is. There's a connector and adapter that you can run the internet through that to your device and be connected through a wire. And definitely with your laptops and your computers, those should all be connected. The speed is faster when you have a wired connection. And so for those that have children who are gaming, that would be the way to convince them about it. And then, a lot of the gamer kids, they also have, the wireless controls. So getting a piece of shielding fabric, and having them actually use that over the controller would be a way to help kind of mitigate their exposure. Because typically a teenager is holding the controller right near their private parts and radiating themselves.
Yes. Oh, that makes me so sad to see that. And then people who are still putting their laptop over your lap. And I'm like, no, don't carry that phone in your pocket or in your back pocket, or put your laptop over your parts. And then kids are sitting down with them over their bellies. And it's like their iPad, and they're just doing this all day long. And I see my niece and nephew doing it. I'm like, so what can we do for the kids, like 5-6-year-old kids? You said I can't even imagine what this looks like. Like, what do? They plug in something and...
Yeah, it's a little, I'm seeing if I have one around here. I've got one that my computer is connected to, but it's got my internet connection on it. But yeah, it's just like a little plug, like little square plug. It's a Belkin brand, and it's a Ethernet to Lightning adapter by Belkin, Belkin. That's one of the brands that we recommend.
Right.
And so you can use that for your phone. You can use it for your tablet. When I use it, I just, I keep my phone in airplane mode at night. And then in the morning, I connect it to my adapter and download all the information, all the updates, the Facebook notifications, Instagram notifications, emails, everything is downloaded via the wire. And then if I do have to take it off airplane mode later, I don't have that huge blast of information downloading onto my phone. And because your phone, once it goes off airplane mode and it has all this information coming in, it's trying to reach the tower and download that information. So it's blasting out a much stronger signal at that point. So at least the first thing you can do is get into daily habits of reducing your levels of chronic exposure during the day. That would be little things like keeping your laptop off your lap, or getting a little pad to put underneath it that blocks the magnetic field.
Like this?
Just like that, yeah. And then using wired ear buds, like you and I have. That's another thing. And then with the Apple laptops, you actually need a grounded cord. So they have the cord extender that that you can kind of click into. So you can take this little thing off.
Oh yeah, right.
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 And there's actually a connection that that's grounded, and it will come off of that, and you plug that in, and that will reduce your electric field exposure on your laptop, on your
Awesome.
Apple laptop.
Awesome. That's a cool feature that they gave us with the plugs. So this case, like cases like this for iPads or phones versus stickers, I mean, if they're not going to do all the advanced things like you're talking about right now, which may not sound so advanced to you, you know, just getting a case for a phone or an iPad for kids, are these enough for them, at least for now, versus also those stickers too? Just curious about your input on the stickers that people put on their phones.
Yeah, I've tested a lot of the stickers and holograms and pendants and things like that, and I prefer to work with solutions that are actually making a reduction in the meter and in the equipment that we use to measure the frequencies. And a lot of those products claim to harmonize and protect you from the EMF. I kind of see it as, if it's doing anything, if we think of that scale, so I got both my hands up here, of nourishment versus stressors, stickers, pendants, and harmonizers and those sorts of things, they don't fall under the category of removing the EMF stress. They would fall under the category of adding some kind of beneficial frequency or support to the body, if they're doing anything at all. And so that's, you have to do both. You have to add the nourishing support, and you have to remove the stressor. And you know, I think there's some products that are probably better and have a little more evidence than others, but generally speaking, I don't recommend any harmonizing stickers or pendants or anything like that, just because of the testing that I've done on all the different types of products that are out there.
Like it could provide a sense of false safety when they're not also doing things like this and putting cases on to protect and ground and reduce.
Yeah, there's real science that's involved in this technology that we're using, and there's also real science in how to block the technology. And so, you know, we kind of just have to be real with what we're dealing with, and understand that, you know, it's a foreign frequency. It's something we've never been exposed to. And so we need to come up with technologies that block us from that actual exposure, not some random new technology that's, you know, NASA, whatever, Tesla, something that's some hidden thing that our ancestors never had, that kind of technology. You know, it's just like the best ideas that we get are actually the respecting our human biology and where we came from, and trying to recreate that and open up those healing responses. It's not necessarily coming up with some new technology to mitigate some other technology. That's kind of the pharmaceutical approach to things, is we throw a drug at something, you know, like, okay, we have this disease, this new epidemic of chronic illness, modern illness, and so we'll come up with some new technology, some drug, and we'll throw that at it, when in fact what we should be doing is finding out the root cause of it, removing the stressor that's causing the disease. And so that's kind of the two different, it's really a different paradigm, the harmonizers versus actually removing the stressor. Removing the stressor is getting at the root cause. The harmonizers are more like a Band-Aid or more of a allopathic approach, is what I would consider.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. That's a great way to look at it. And as we round out here, because we're running out of time, and I just wanted to touch base on one thing before we close it off for today, is, you know, 5G and what's coming up with 5G towers being at schools, 5G towers being at, you know, parks, recreation centers, fire departments. I mean, I pulled up yesterday to an appointment, and in my car, and as I pulled up, my whole left ear just was like, and it sounded like somebody closed a door on my ear, and then it went, and then I went, what is happening? It just made my body feel really weird. And I go, there must be a 5G tower to the left of me. But I thought 5G is not activated though. But I said, but there must be. And I looked over, and there was a gigantic 5G tower right in the top of the fire station to the left of me. And I was like, but I thought 5G wasn't turned on, and I live in Sedona. So I thought, is there something I don't know that's happening, or something we don't know? You know, we hear all these schools where the schools were shut down because there was 5G towers installed, and the kids are going home, higher incidences of cancer. So is there validity to this? And if so, what can we do if we're leaving our home and we're walking around in all of this 5G technology. Like, is there clothing we could wear, helmets? What is there that we could do to at least minimize this exposure, other than not living in big cities and not living close to towers?
Right. Yeah, it's difficult, and with the priority system, of course, like the most important time to protect is at night when you sleep. That's when your body's going to repair from any damage that's done during the day. And so it's very important to start there. A lot of us are concerned about the daytime exposures, and we should be, but if you haven't done the nighttime stuff, then that is where you definitely want to start. I just kind of want to start with that answer. But during the day, a lot of people talk about clothing and things like that, but the problem with clothing that shields you from the frequencies is that it also acts as a resonator for frequencies, and you have this conductive material that's making you actually a larger antenna. And so even though it's blocking you from a primary frequency coming in, as it collects that frequency and starts to vibrate at its own frequency, depending on how big the piece of metal is, it's going to rebroadcast a secondary frequency very, very close to your body that may or may not be more damaging than the primary frequency. So it's kind of a mixed bag, the type of like shielded clothing and whether that's going to be a really good solution or not. And so when you see a tower, I would say that the best thing to do is to have a strategy in place for when you go out, you have a little packet of supplementation that's going to help support your body in dealing with the inflammation that you're inevitably going to be exposed to. And so that's where you have your packets of hydrogen, water, and some supplementation. And we're living in a world where, it's not natural anymore. And we have some resources that are able to help us and technology that will help us to deal with the stressors more. And so I like to get the more evidence-based and products and things that we know actually help support the body, the pathways in dealing with the inflammation and everything. But as far as the 5G towers, most of the 5G frequencies that they're using are below 6 gigahertz, and it's the intensity. It's more towers that's the problem. It's not, and I don't like the millimeter waves, but we're focusing so much on the millimeter waves, the 30 gigahertz and above, that we're kind of ignoring a lot of the stuff that we had with 3G and 4G, which was already terrible, and it was already showing a rise in all these symptoms in people, and it actually resonates more with the human body. And so it's the saturation, the increase. 5G is not just millimeter waves, it's also increasing all of our current exposure so dramatically, like 5-10 times more, because they're putting the towers every so often. And most of the towers that people look at and they say, okay, that's got to be a 5G tower. We've measured these, and they are a 5G tower, but it's not at that higher frequency. It's at the lower frequency that's a 4G, but it's closer to us. So it's more damaging. It's going to cause more symptoms, more ringing in the ears and everything. And the good news about all this, or the silver lining, is that we have technology to block those types of frequencies. And so we just need to, we at least protect the home, and then have some strategies in place to deal with the stress while we're out and about. Right. And getting more sunlight. Sunlight actually helps to inhibit the production of peroxynitrite as well. So if you see a tower, rip off your shirt, get as much sunlight as you can, and that should help you deal with it.
Yeah, so for kids in school where there's a 5G tower right there, or I've seen them in a lot of like baseball facilities and sports complexes, like, okay, we're going to not do jerseys or school costumes today. Everybody's just going to be topless. I can see how that's going to go over well. They're like, oh, yeah. So the kids running around without clothes on, and they're like, oh, works for the 5-year-olds, but I think above that, they're going to start taking offense. So yeah, a lot to cover, Brian. I think that pretty much rounds it out for today. We can keep going. And I know that if I was someone listening to this right now, I'd be thinking, oh my God, Brian is extremely wise. They're talking about a lot of new things. So my suggestion to all of you would be, I'm going to put some resources below that directly connects to Brian's website, Brian's program, another program that Brian created with the guy, Nick Pinot, that I got certified as a practitioner regarding this topic through. So there's going to be tons of resources. And if there's any videos that you can send over, Brian, of you like showing people how to wire some of these things with some of the things they might buy, you know, that are already out there, I would love to link them, because even me, I'm going, oh, what wire? I'm a woman. I'm like, where do I go for the wire? What do I do with the wire? You know? And that's why I've always thought to have you over, where it just didn't work out the times that we did it. But I highly suggest you have Brian or one of his team members. He's got 5 people he's trained to come over to your home and just show you these things hand on, so you could see it when the frequencies turn up and things to your home. You're going to be really surprised at some of the reasons why you guys might have some symptoms. We'll end with a couple case studies. I just wanted to share just very briefly. I work with a client who had a daughter. She was like 10 months old, and she was having 5 seizures a week plus. And first thing I asked her was, okay, how often, where is your daughter sleeping? Is there a phone next to her head? Tell me where the TV is. Where's the Wi-Fi device? Are you in an apartment building? You know, there's all these different things that can, like we talked about today, interfere with a child's rhythm. And so we cleaned up the room that she was sleeping in, and she went down to 1 seizure per week. So that's just one example. Another example is a client that I worked with who almost died from breast implant and toxins from Botox. And then the next thing, because we got those things out of her lives, but she takes a while to detox from these things, right? To do it the proper way. And the next thing I answered, because she was having problems with sleep, I was like, tell me about your bed. Tell me about what you have plugged in, you know, all the things. She's like, well, I have a sleep number bed. Okay, that's plugged in. You know, that's number one. Unplug that sucker. Let's do an experiment. She was also sometimes sleeping with a electric pad over her that was plugged in. And so she was essentially just sandwiched between these things. And I said, unplug all that, and let's just see if unplugging those 2 things helps. And she's like, I slept like a baby. What? Just those 2 things. So those are just a couple case studies. And then she came back to our session that day, and I was like, why do you look and feel so different? She's like, I unplugged the things. And she's like, for the last week, I've gotten great sleep. I'm like, you look like a whole new person. So these are not small. And Brian, would you like to add anything to a couple, you know, big success stories that you've heard, the people that you worked with?
Yeah. So one recent one, I'll share 2. There's a recent one from, I actually recorded a podcast at this guy's house, Chris Gethin. He's a big bodybuilder guy. And he was telling me, like, I sleep like shit, you know, like, like he has an Aura ring and he's tracking his sleep, and he's getting like between 5 minutes and 30 minutes of deep sleep. And I've worked with Dr. Mercola on this portable EMF tent, and I had it with me, you know, throughout this trip that we took, a 3-month-long trip. And I just said, well, why don't you use it for the 2 nights that we were staying with them at in their guest bedroom. And so he used it for 2 nights, and both nights the first night he had over an hour of deep sleep and before he'd never had anything above 30 minutes. And usually it's around between 5 and 20 minutes. And then the second night he had 1 hour and 10 minutes of deep sleep, and he felt like refreshed and so much better. And, you know, he would consider himself to be EMF sensitive as well. But, you know, his whole time having the Aura ring tracking his sleep for like more than a year, never had above 30 minutes. And the first night over an hour, and then 1 hour and 10 minutes the second night.
Just from that tent, that one thing you guys changed?
Just from the tent. It blocks out all the wireless signals. It's grounded, so there's no electricity coming onto his body while he's sleeping. Wow. And it just, you know, it basically is like a cocoon, an ancestral cocoon that you create to have that.
Is that on your website, Brian?
We did a video, so it's on his YouTube channel, where we talk about that and go through his house and test all the kinds of things that we test for on the assessment. And then another one is a fellow practitioner friend of mine who shielded her room, and she had a cell phone tower actually right across the street. And the first night she slept in her shielded room, she was having like heart racing and temperature, like a rise in temperature, sweats and things like that. And then the second night was the same. She's like, oh, I don't know what's going on here. This is crazy. So she kind of let me know. And then she thought, she put her practitioner hat on. She's like, okay, well, what are these symptoms a sign of? And she's like, well, I'm having hyperthyroid symptoms, but that's weird because I have hypothyroidism. And then she realized that she was still taking her thyroid glandular. So she cut that out, and then the very next night she slept better than she had in the better part of a year. So
because she took away the root of maybe the hypothyroid problems and then didn't need the medication.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
So the very same night that she had the shielded room, her body was able to dial down everything, and the thyroid medication or glandular was too much for the system. She didn't need it anymore.
Wow.
And
And you
so,
see heart palpitations and stuff like that for an overactive thyroid at that point.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Wow.
so there, the body, like, it desperately wants to heal. And
Yes.
I think that we don't give our body enough credit sometimes, because it's a healing machine. It's constantly repairing and regenerating cells. And if we just give it the chance to do that in an environment that's free of these stressors, it's just amazing what happens. Almost instantly, you start to see results. And from deep sleep to getting off medication, it's going to make everything work better and accelerate healing in so many ways that I'm excited about doing this work, because I get to be on the front lines and see people's lives just change after being in that kind of sleeping environment, and get to experience all the different kinds of symptoms that people are recovering from.
Yes.
And it's amazing. So I look forward to more and more people doing this and sharing their stories.
Yeah, there's lots of them, and the one that you just mentioned is pretty profound. I mean, how many women are on medications for hypothyroidism and then take it and they feel worse, and they're always going back and forth with a doctor, TSH ranges of this and that, and it's just, we're still not even close to the root. You're still up here trimming grass versus getting into the soil, which is determining the health of the grass. So now we're in the soil and we're running around, and I'm talking about root cause here when I say in the soil. That's why my program is called Chi of Life, because it's cleanse, heal, ignite, and it's your tree of life. Like, your body is always on your side, and you hear yourself talk saying, my body's trying to kill me, my hormones hate me. It's absolutely not true. They're trying to speak to you. So now that you have a place to learn to listen to them, which is a huge part of what this podcast is all about, what Brian talked about today, you can dive deeper and determine if that's a big part of your root cause issues, especially the night sweats. A lot of women have estrogen dominance, and they're wondering if it's like their hormones. And yeah, it is your hormones, but why are your hormones speaking out loud the way they are in the language of symptoms? And this is such a huge part of it. So, Brian, any final words before we wrap up this 1.5 hour long episode that I thought we were going to go an hour with, but we covered so much ground. So it's so worth every minute that you've been here for people to take these and run with them and implement them.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, one thing I really like to leave people with is that, you know what, after hearing all this information, you might feel really, really overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And then also, there's also this other barrier in a lot of people's homes. Probably most people that we do assessments for, there's at least one person in the house who's very skeptical of EMFs being a problem at all. And I'm very proud to say that we have a really good track record of convincing these skeptics in order to implement changes, because really the reason that people are skeptical, especially it tends to be the men in the households. Although I do have one person I'm dealing with right now where it's the woman that's the skeptic, and I have to go do that assessment like next week. But like with the skeptics, they're leery of being taken advantage of. And so if we can, one thing we really try to do is connect with people on this personal level and show them that, hey, we're on your side. We really believe that what we're doing is true, and we do our business with integrity, and we're health practitioners. We really want to help and aid people in being their best self, and improving and awakening all these dormant healing responses. And so even though this all can be very overwhelming, there is a path forward. And then once you get it done, it's not like, continuing on with this and that protocol. It's like, you fix this problem, you can basically rule it out as a big stressor. And it's just a one-time thing that you really have to do for a few primary things, and then some lifestyle changes. Just like you have to change the food that you're eating, you have to change the habits of how you're using your technology. And there's going to be some tweaks here and there and things like that. And every person's different, but ultimately there's a plan that we can take people through, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that, there's a lot of people working out this EMF thing from a political perspective, and we're trying to stop the crazy increase in exposure and everything. But we can also attack it from this side of taking care of your own family, taking care of your own body. And, there's a pathway to healing that starts with, listening to this podcast, implementing some of the things that we've talked about, and then, booking somebody who like us or another professional who is able to actually convince the skeptics in the house and help guide you through the process. And that's one of the really important parts of it, is to interview the person who you're going to hire, because it may be your only shot at actually convincing the skeptic in your house to follow through with that. And I don't ever want to be the person that's gotten in the way of solutions being installed, because often it is the only shot that people have to hire just one person, because there's going to be a no for hiring a second or third opinion.
Right. And I mean, once I started seeing the actual meter reading of things going to the red, and knowing that, oh my God, I'm touching this thing that is a red flag all day long, and seeing that, and then going, look how dirty this is, look how dirty. And then you start, and then when you see it with your own two eyes, then it starts to become something that's more real, and it's in your own home. So I can't recommend a home assessment enough for everybody, especially if this is a home that you're living in for a while, and investing the resources to protect yourself and your family. I'll find that link for the resource for the tent below with their YouTube video. What was the name again for the guy, Brian? The guy that you...
Chris Gethin, Kris.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a video.
Okay, I'll find that. And then I'll put some also resources below for proteolytic enzymes, the ones that I like. I recommend those to all my women who are going through explant therapy anyway, because it supports lymphatic drainage as well. So I'll put some links below for that. And then also keep in mind, stay away from all this stuff when you're eating. Like Brian said, don't drive and eat. Just relax and sit in nature under the sun if it's not too scorching hot in Sedona, like where I live. Because if you've got these things interfering with your digestive tract, it takes voltage to digest your food. It takes voltage to make digestive fluids in your stomach and stomach acid. So if you need voltage and you're being disrupted with that because of these kinds of fields, then you're not going to digest your food well. And if you're not digesting your food well, then you're going to feel like hell. So it's just bottom line stuff, is just as practice some of these things and just work your way up to it. It might take a while, but baby steps, and protect your babies and protect your balls and your boobs. Keep these things as far away from them as possible, especially if you're trying to have kids or have kids. So thanks again, Brian, for being here. And I thank you guys so much for all the questions, because without this show, we wouldn't have anybody to speak to without curiosity. And you guys stay curious, stay cleansed, heal your body, and ignite your life. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to today's show. If this episode really tugged at your soul and you're ready to have your personal breakthrough, we would love to have a heart-to-heart with you to get you crystal clear on 3 things. What do you want? What's standing in your way? And how do we get you to your soul goal in the fastest time possible? Visit my site, dianekaiser.com/call to schedule your free 1-hour connection session with one of our warriors to map out exactly how you want to look, feel, and live. We've helped thousands of women warriors just like you all around the world free themselves from the symptoms and suffering they never thought possible. And you just might be our next success story. Talk soon.